Well, I want to thank everybody for coming down here for dedication of the plaques. To my right, to your left, is Councilwoman Chanel McCullum and Councilman Jim Ballard, and obviously our County Sheriff Millie Scott stopped by. At this point, I would like to bring up Jerry Gargiulo and his son Jim. Come on up, and they're going to explain a little bit in detail what this plaque is all about. And I want to thank the militia for being out here. This is, I was told, the good militia. The one that was on the U.S. side, right? Not the British. So, but Jerry, I still don't understand to this day how this happened that the folks here in this section of Newmarket gave aid and comfort to the enemy and not knowing that. So you're going to explain a little bit what happened here?
We are going to explain it, yeah.
But they didn't have a pork roll sandwich at that time.
No, they tried.
They tried? Okay, I just want to make sure. So, well, come on up here to the microphone.
Jim, do you want to say a few words first?
Oh, Jim, you're going to say a few words here.
Very quickly, and you know, it's amazing when the battles were around here. I know that most people call them the enemy,
Yeah.
but I too am a Brit. So they were good Brits. And I understand that this was the area that most of the Brits hung out for quite some time. And what do you see now? Great people. No enemies at all. We're good.
Okay. All right, thanks. And they hung out here for it was a good drinking hole, right? And I don't mean the H2O type. All right, come on up.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jim Gargiulo, and I'm here to set the stage for you to take you back to the late 1770s. And if you've attended some of our other historical presentations in this park, then you probably already know that this area looked very different than it does today. For instance, the area that you all are sitting in was an island. It actually had the Bound Brook flowing where it does today as part of Newmarket Lake, and it flowed behind you as well, making that area an island. You had a mill over here behind me, right where the falls are. That was a grist mill. Obviously, the houses you see in the area weren't here. There were no street lights, no traffic lights, no stop signs, and no train tracks. Most of the area around here was farmland with a sporadic house here or there. Although the roads we know today as Stelton and Lakeview and Newmarket did exist, they neither bore those names nor the pavement that sits atop them today. They were simple dirt roads, and this area, which was then known as Quibbletown, was a simple stagecoach stop and farming community. During the American Revolution, the people of this area were mostly citizen farmers who favored the Patriot cause, but there still were a few that were loyal to the British. As we've detailed in some of our previous presentations, this area saw some notable action during the war, and the most significant of these in our immediate area was the Battle of Quibbletown, which occurred right here in 1777, February of 77. That was a confrontation between a large British contingent of about 2,000 soldiers foraging for food and a much smaller force of Patriot militia and some regulars. And that engagement was fought right where you're sitting right now, with particularly heated action occurring near the bridge, which of course back then was a wooden bridge, and there's been several incarnations since then. 3-pound cannon like the one you see behind the mayor was used by the Patriots in that skirmish, which is why the cannon sits where it does today, that replica. Later in June of 1777, the area down by the Pepsi plant, only about a quarter mile from here, was the prelude to the Battle of Short Hills. So we've seen a lot of action in 1777. Now, unlike the beginning of the war in 75 and 76, when the Americans were losing one battle after the next, their fortunes began to change in 1777 with victories like the one at Saratoga in New York, and then standing toe-to-toe with the British at the Battle of Monmouth in a full-scale engagement. Meanwhile, this immediate area was a bit quieter during these years, but there was always the threat of an invasion from the British, who had a very large portion of their army and navy based in Staten Island. So times were very tense. You have to keep that in mind. And all of this leads us to the reason we're speaking to you here today. My father's going to tell you a story about a man named John Graves Simcoe. He's a controversial figure for sure, as many are in history, and we're not here to judge him one way or the other. We're here simply to tell his story as it relates to our area and then beyond that. But it's up to you to come to your own conclusions. We're just here to tell the story. So at this time, please allow me to present the man behind the project, my father, Jerry Gargiulo.
Come on, Jerry.
Thank you, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm glad you're all here to see our latest reminder of Piscataway's Revolutionary War history in the form of this new historical marker. Placed near the earlier marker, which we have here, the new one centers on an event that occurred here 2.5 years after that first marker. As you've heard me say before, our township's history isn't just something that you read from a dusty book. The people who lived, worked, and played here were just like you and me in the 1770s, separated from us only by an accident of time. They're real people. The very place where you are now was the center of a very early village of Quibbletown and its surrounding farms. By 1779, the people of Quibbletown had endured a war that had begun over 4 years before, and to them seemed to have no end in sight. At least the enemy, the English, were no longer encamped at the other end of our own township, as they were 2 years before when they constantly stole crops and livestock from the farms and the gardens of the area. But they weren't a whole lot further away either. They were in as close as Staten Island. And you know how quickly we can get there today. Now this corner behind me was a busy crossroads even back then, with taverns on either corner at various times. Taverns such as these were hotels and also served meals, besides drinks, to accommodate coach travelers between North Jersey and the capital at Philadelphia. The travelers felt safer knowing that elements of Washington's army were in North Jersey, and the green uniformed cavalry of Patriot Colonel Light Horse Harry Lee was operating in Monmouth and southern Middlesex counties. I'd like you to get a feel of what happened here on October 26, 1779, when British Colonel John Graves Simcoe rode up with nearly 100 Tory and loyal horsemen. They were all dressed in uniforms, like green uniforms, like you see these gentlemen here. They had crossed from Staten Island by boat as darkness fell the night before, then rode all night to this location. To put you here at that time, let's pretend that you were a merchant from Jersey City who got on a stagecoach with your wife early on October 25th to visit your sister in Bordentown. After traveling for most of the day, you were told to be ready to reboard the coach at 7:30 a.m. No sleeping in today. That meant to be downstairs by sunrise at 6:30 for breakfast on the 26th. Just as you, your wife, and some of the other passengers were trickling down the stairs in the morning, there was a thunder of hooves outside. You and the others hurried outside to find a large group of green-clad horsemen who had begun to dismount. Several folks said that it was Colonel Lee's dragoons, that's another word for cavalry. The cavalry leader said that he and the troopers were looking for Tory prisoners who had escaped from Washington's Continental Army. With that, most of the people cheered. So the tavern keeper brought out some bread and fried pork for the horsemen, while I drank from the well and the horses ate grain and drank from the troughs. By then, the merchants from down the street and the miller from across the road, the mill was right here, had come by to offer their good wishes to the horsemen as well. The horsemen were quickly on their way. A half hour later, a local asked where Roberts the baker was because his shop was closed. And they had just been in the group that had greeted the dragoons. Well, you didn't find out until you were back in Jersey City 2 weeks later that the riders you all greeted so warmly were British and Tory raiders of the Queen's Rangers that you mistook for patriots. Only Roberts the baker recognized their leader, John Graves Simcoe, and had secretly ridden away to New Brunswick to warn Governor Livingston, who Roberts knew was staying there at the time. On October 26, the raiders had gone on to free Tory prisoners, burn militia boats on the Raritan, and much of the Somerset County seat. But thanks to Roberts, the Patriot militia and dragoons were mobilized and fought the raiders on their way back to Staten Island. The Patriot soldiers were successful in capturing their leader, Simcoe. He was released, however, before Christmas in a prisoner exchange. So you felt embarrassed for having been aiding the enemy, but relieved at the same time that no one at the Quiveltown Tavern and Inn was harmed. So that you understand, my little story took the form of a tiny historical novel. We don't know if there was a person from Jersey City at the tavern, or who it was that rode off to warn Governor Livingston of Simcoe's presence. But someone did, that we know. The rest of the story we know from Simcoe's own journal. And believe me, the people at the tavern were not called patriots by Colonel Simcoe, but damned rebels. Now our marker not only tells of Simcoe's raid, but also has a short biography of Simcoe, along with a brief history of the Queen's Rangers. As one of several loyalist units, these Americans so hated their patriot neighbors and could not understand why anyone would want to be traitors to their king and mother country. So we have also included a section on atrocities committed by the Rangers against Washington's troops. If you don't get to read it this evening, the marker, of course, will be here from now on. If Simcoe's raid marker was made possible by a grant from the Walmart Foundation through the Piscataway store and the kind assistance of its community coordinator, Sandy Sachs. By the way, they're the same folks who paid for our first marker 8 years ago. Jim and I would like to thank his cousin, my nephew, Vince Gargiulo, for his fantastic design of that marker as well as the first one, and suffering through nearly a score of revisions. Thank you, Mayor Brian Waller, and Dana, Gene, and Tim of his office, Councilman Jim Ballard, Peter Naiman of PCTV. Henry Hinterstein, our township's landscape architect, was an enormous help, and to Guy Gaspari, and the men of Public Works who were so careful to be sure that the installation was correct and professionally done. Thank you. Thank you to East Jersey Old Town for allowing their historical interpreters to be with us this evening. In particular, Ray Helga, Mark Worthington, and Ed Glidden. And thanks finally to my colleagues, some of who are here tonight, the trustees and officers of the Piscataway Historical and Heritage Society. So thanks for listening. Have fun, everybody, and enjoy the concert.
All right. Let's give a round of applause for both Jerry and Jim for all the hard work, and especially our folks in attire, Revolutionary War attire there, especially in this hot weather tonight. They need another round of applause. Now the real question is, are they going to take a drink from down by the water now? Would you have done that 200 plus years ago?
Not when we had beer and world.
No, okay, all right. Now that's a smart answer. Well, thank you all and everybody coming down for the event early prior to the concert, and please enjoy the concert tonight. It's here for you to everybody to enjoy during this summer season that we have on Thursday nights out here. So keep your fingers crossed that we don't get rain tonight, okay? Thank you.